Hello crew and welcome aboard. Today's match is another relaxed round and I am playing against Niall again, so don't dare go to bed. Niall situates himself in the mirror quadrant again and has joined the Imperial Starfleet this time. I am playing a non-aligned deck today, which was built by Kevin Jaeger. If you want to witness how he puts the deck together and the whole thought process behind it, you find links in the description below. I highly recommend to check out his channel. Niall wins the coin flip and we start by placing our doorways onto the table. Niall has a Q's tent, a temporal conduit and an alternate universe door. I have a temporal micro wormhole and a Q's tent. Niall's first mission, Observe Spatial Coordinates, is in the mirror quadrant and I go for the alpha quadrant with Conduct Stellar Research, which allows me to download the Amargosa Observatory. Niall seeds Disrupt Alliance next, for which he also gets an emblem of the Empire and the Art of Diplomacy into play. And my next mission is Intercept Dignitary. Niall keeps seeding into the mirror quadrant and sticks the Universal Enlistment Drive next to Bajor. I am in the mood for Insurrection and place it next to Amargosa. Niall's next mission is Unsanctioned Attack, and I have Study Cybernetic Relics. Niall then seeds Evil Earth next to Dissident Controlled Space, and I have Assemble Fleet, which I place next to the Baku planet. Niall's last mission is Oppress Population, and he places the Mirror Vulcan homeworld next to the Starfleet homeworld. I then complete the mission phase with Observe Stellar Rebirth next to Regulus. We then continue with batch seeding our dilemmas to the two fairly split space lines. Notably, I have 3 self-seeds, 2 beneath Assemble Fleet and 1 at the Baku planet. Afterwards, we place our remaining seed cards onto the table. Alongside his doorways and emblem, Niall seeds 3 hidden agendas, an Imperial Outpost at Unsanctioned Attack, which downloads 1 small step to the table for the first function, 22nd Century Japan, which downloads the Imperial Palace, and Protect the Timeline to the time location, Assert Authority, Long Live the Empire, and Secure Homeworld to Earth. I seed the Sonar Observatory, Duck Blind at the Baku planet, Cybernetics Expertise, a neutral outpost to Regulus, where I also seed a space door, and War Council. And finally, Preserver Obelisk, which downloads Dr. Roger Corby and Kirk Android. We both draw our starting hands and advance to the play phase. At the start of his turn, Niall uses Long Live the Empire to download the ISS Enterprise Annex 01 to the Imperial Palace, and he immediately uses its special download for a Suliban cloaking device. As his normal card play, he brings Tyranny to the table. He then reports Crewman Biggs for free to the Imperial Palace and Chief Surgeon Phlox via Protect the Timeline. He then flips one of his hidden agendas, discards the Defend Homeworld to download Captain Archer, and uses his special download right away for even more Tyranny. The whole team in Japan beams up to the Enterprise and time travels to present Earth with Protect the Timeline, and then moves further to the remote colony. Niall then uses Long Live the Empire and discards 2 cards from hand to prevent 1 Tyranny from counting down. At the end of his turn, he completes Assert Authority since he is at a Universal mission and declares Commander Archer as the contender for a Brave New World. This also draws him a card, scores 5 points, and downloads Betray Captain. He then draws 1 more card to end his turn. As my normal card play, I report a Flexian Scout vessel. I then place Sampo for free to the Sonar Observatory and Excalbian Kalis for free with the War Council. I beam some personnel up to the vessel and fly to the Baku planet, where I beam down Robokirk. I then use the observatory itself to download Galatine, so that I have 2 anthropology for Duck Blind there. I beam Sampo to the vessel, fly it back to the neutral outpost, dock, and bring everyone to the facility. I use Temporal Micro Wormhole to download Spacetime Portal and end my turn by drawing 2 cards. At the beginning of his turn, Niall flips Crossover and Invitation so that he can report Hoshi Sato to the Mirror Quadrant headquarters as his normal card play now. He uses the special downloads of her for We're Ready and of Captain Archer for a Watchdog. The latter allows him to play another Tyranny for free. Niall then uses Long Live the Empire, discards 2 cards, places the top 2 cards of his draw deck beneath Watchdog and prevents 1 Tyranny countdown. The Enterprise time travels back to Japan and picks up Hoshi. At the end of his turn, Niall would draw 2 cards thanks to We Are Ready, but they are placed beneath Watchdog instead. I play Ruafo for free to the Observatory, the android Raina Capek for free with Cybernetics Expertise, and Anya with the War Council. As my normal card play, I recruit mercenaries and choose Lore to download to the neutral outpost, for which I lose 10 points. I then beam a personnel to the scout vessel and fly to Baku again, pick up Ruafo, fly it back to the outpost and bring everyone back onto the facility. I already end my turn and draw 2 cards. At the start of his turn, Niall can now use his Tyrannies because he had no cards in hand. However, he uses only 2 of them to download Captain Forrest and the ISS Avenger to hand. He then takes all cards that are placed beneath Watchdog into his hand. As his normal card play, he then plays the just downloaded ISS Avenger, plays Captain Forrest for free with Protect the Timeline, and Com Officer Sato for free with the Imperial Palace. He then plays Empress for free to Sato, which is not possible, but Niall catches this later that turn and fixes it. He uses Long Live the Empire, discards 2 cards, places 2 cards from deck beneath Watchdog, and prevents a Tyranny from counting down. He staves both of his ships, and time travels them to Earth using Protect the Timeline. He does some beaming, and flies the Enterprise to Dissident Controlled Space. Back at Earth, the ISS Avenger beams a few personnel to home soil, and they start a mission attempt. I reveal the salty M113 creature, and Niall presents his crew. He has 4 exobiology there, so he can cure the dilemma no matter who I would kill. In that case, I choose musical Hoshi Sato, since her skills and traits are just too delicious, and the dilemma is discarded. I reveal Horta as the next dilemma, which randomly kills crewman Biggs, but cannot be cured that easily. As appropriate for Mirror Earth, I then reveal Misinterpreted History, which kills the remaining flocks and the attempt ends. Niall goes to his end step, and since his contender is now on board the same ship with its matching commander, he can complete Betray Captain. Contender Archer kills Captain Forrest, Niall draws 3 cards, which are placed beneath Watchdog instead, scores 8 points and downloads Consolidate Power. He ends his turn and places both his card draws beneath Watchdog. I play another Recruit Mercenaries and pay 10 points to download Shobihar and Suna to the outpost at Regulus. I then play Joran for free with War Council and beam a few personnel up to the scout vessel, which then flies to Baku. I use the special download on Ruafo to get the Injector Assembly 1 and collect metaphasic particles. I leave most of my people behind and fly the vessel back to Regulus to start a mission attempt there. Niall reveals Romulan mind probes as the first dilemma, but since I have only 1 personnel present, the dilemma doesn't do anything except discarding itself. A fast ship would be nice, kills Joran afterwards, and the attempt ends. I have nothing else to do, and end my turn by drawing 2 cards. Niall starts by downloading Admiral Black, Crewman Davila, and Crewman Gam with his 3 Tyranny events. While he's searching his deck, I use Anya's special download for Salia. Niall then takes the cards from Watchdog into hand, plays another Tyranny for free with the Watchdog, Crewman Davila for free with the Palace, Crewman Soval with Protect the Timeline, and this time he plays the Empress correctly on Contender Archer. He uses the Temporal Conduit to time travel the Enterprise to Japan, picks up the fresh recruits there, and uses the Conduit again to travel back to the present. He uses Long Live the Empire, discards 3 cards from hand, places the top 2 cards from the deck beneath Watchdog, and prevents a Tyranny countdown. He beams his personnel a bit around, and travels the ISS Avenger to the 22nd century. At the end of his turn, he places its card draws beneath Watchdog and passes back to me. I play a War Council, and with Lore and Ruafo providing the 4 Treachery, I draw 3 cards. I then play Perina for free to the Sonar Observatory, and Jonathan Archer with the War Council. I think about whether I should do a more proper mission attempt rather than simply retreating again. I decide for the latter, beam Archer aboard the vessel which is already in orbit, and of course get punished hard for my decision. Niall reveals Linguistic Legerdemain as the next dilemma, and since I cannot overcome it, it blocks the mission for the next 4 turns now. I don't want to risk all my personnel on the Baku planet at once, so I already end my cowardly play turn and draw 2 cards. Niall begins by downloading cards for all his tyranny, and he fetches Crewman Garm, Admiral Black and Chief Engineer Tucker to hand. He uses his Empress to automatically complete his current contender objective, Consolidate Power, which scores him 12 points and lets him download the final act of the storyline, Declare New Sovereign. He takes the cards from Watch Deck into his hand and plays Crewman Garm for free with the Palace, Admiral Black as his normal card play, and Chief Engineer Tucker for free with Protect the Timeline. He uses the latter to download Technical Wizardry, which he flips to its hidden side, and moves the Avenger back to Earth after beaming up the personnel. He then beams some personnel down to the planet and starts another attempt to secure Earth. I reveal the already known misinterpreted history, and Niall suspends play by using the special download and the Vila for a seductive dance. He discards one of his tyranny events from play and activates it so that Admiral Black can share his law with the Vila. I kill Crewman Soval, and President Admiral Black overcomes the dilemma. Just a short notice here. We didn't catch it at this moment, but an error has occurred again. Niall didn't discard his hand before the mission attempt, which means his watchdog causes all his personnel to lose their first listed skill. In that case, I could have killed Admiral Black with the misinterpreted history, and Niall wouldn't have been able to overcome the dilemma then. We realized that mistake shortly afterwards, but pretended as he would have done it in the correct order anyways. The current away team cannot solve the mission on its own, so Niall sends the rest of his crews down to the planet, who have no problems with that. Since Commander Archer, being the contender, helped with solving his matching homeworld, Niall can complete Declare New Sovereign, which scores him 15 points, alongside the 30 from Earth. Niall thinks about pushing into the next mission, and I suggest to take some leisure time on beautiful Earth with its cuddly creatures. He humbly declines and flies the ISS Avenger to the remote colony, beams down Com Officer Sato, and attempts the enlistment drive. I reveal Dead End, which he overcomes now. Sato cannot solve the mission on her own, so he beams down some backup and scores 30 more points. While this was all too easy, Niall still needs to solve 2 more missions, since he's 40 points short for a victory, but all his remaining missions show less than that. He uses Long Live the Empire to discard his hand now, places 2 cards from deck beneath Watchdog, and prevents a tyranny from counting down. At the end of his turn, Niall uses Declare New Sovereign and stops Emperor Archer to download Ensign Tamara. I do something similar and use Slave Master Shobihar's special download for Dinesh. He places his 2 card draws beneath Watchdog and passes back to me. In place of my normal card play, I use the Space Door to download a Sonar battleship to the neutral outpost. I again have only one free play with Sardar via the War Council. I beam a few personnel to the scout vessel, fly to the Baku planet, beam most of my personnel up and fly it back to Regulus. I then beam a huge load of personnel to the battleship and move it near a stellar nursery to start a mission attempt there. Niall reveals an unscientific method as the first dilemma, and since Reyna Capek is easily my most bright science presence, she's killed, but I still have the 25 cunning to pass. The Calvins enact a show of force, and Niall distills Perina and Jonathan Archer. Perina randomly gets crushed, and Niall reveals Scientific Method as the last dilemma, which I cannot pass after he filtered out too many of my scientists. The mission attempt ends, and I draw 2 cards to end my turn. Niall keeps up his tyranny and downloads Commander T'Pol and Sergeant Mayweather. He grabs the Watchdog cards into his hand and plays Mayweather for free to the Palace and T'Pol with Protect the Timeline. As his normal card play, he reports Corporal Scott. The ISS Avenger flies back to Earth, time travels to Japan using Protect the Timeline, beams up the personnel there, and time travels back to the present using Temporal Conduit. He beams everyone on board the Enterprise and moves it to the spatial interface. He then uses Long Live the Empire to discard his hand, places 2 cards from his deck beneath Watchdog, prevents a tyranny countdown, and starts a mission attempt to observe spatial coordinates. I reveal Thasian Powers, which is the perfect wall against a no-hands strategy. With his massive crew, he easily passes it, but now I reveal Crystalline Entity as the next dilemma. With Lore fiendishly waving at the other quadrant, he requires 13 shields or 2 music to prevent the worst. Niall cannot meet those conditions, so all his personnel die in an instant.
Monster kill.
Upon dying, Niall uses the special download of Ensign Tamara for a regenerate, and since she died a fraction of a second later than the others, the whole discard pile, except Tamara, gets shuffled back into Niall's deck. Niall ends his turn and places his 2 card draws beneath Watchdog. I play Neras for free with War Council and draw 2 cards from her. I play another Recruit Mercenaries and pay 10 more points to download Tolian Soren and Yint, which was fairly unnecessary, but I assumed I had no science left in my deck. In the meantime, Niall uses the special download on the Avenger to get a radiation monitoring. I then beam some personnel from the outpost to the vessel, fly it over near the Stellar Nursery, combine the 2 crews there, and download Reflection Therapy with Suna. Lord is sort of always in need of a therapy, so I replace his computer skill with Science. I keep a few personnel on the Sonar battleship to keep it staffed, and attempt to observe Stellar Rebirth with the crew on the scout vessel. Lore, Jonathan Archer, Tolian Soren and Suna overcome the scientific method, and Soren and Robokirk have the required skills to solve the mission for 35 points. I fly both of my ships to Regulus, beam almost everyone on board the battleship, and my 2 anthropologists on Baku start a mission attempt. Niall reveals another a fast ship would be nice, and after Niall reaffirming twice that I don't want to substitute my ship there, he kills Salia. He then reveals Joel Yichu as the next dilemma, which kills Galatine, and the attempt ends. I fly the Sonar battleship to Baku, beam some personnel down, but do not re-attempt the mission. I end my turn and draw 2 cards. With his remaining tyranny, Niall downloads an Imperial Interceptor. He puts the cards beneath Watchdog into his hand and reports the Interceptor as his normal card play, plays Jeremy Lucas for free to the Palace, and another tyranny with the Watchdog. With only a single personnel, he cannot staff the Interceptor, so Niall is stranded in the past for now. He discards his hand and places 2 cards beneath Watchdog using Long Live the Empire, and places 2 more cards there before ending his turn. With less than 1 minute left on the clock and the essential mission with the Eltonian brain teaser still being blocked by the linguistic legerdemain, I only need to score 95 points in this one turn. I play a Sonar battleship for free to the Observatory, Data for free with Cybernetics Expertise, and Vash as my normal card play. I transport my personnel from the outpost to Baku with the scout vessel, and after some more beaming, I re-attempt the mission with everyone except Lore on board the vessel. He provides the transporter skill alongside the anthropology from Robokirk on the ground to pass to Joel Yichu, and Niall reveals Medical Crisis as the next dilemma. This stops Suna, and since he was my only medical in the away team and there is no nurse hanging around, my last-ditch efforts to catch up crumble to pieces. I cannot do anything else, and with time being up, Niall wins the match. The Empire wins, but everyone is dead. Somewhat flavorful. Jokes aside, I enjoy watching the storytelling part of the contender objectives, and hopefully we see something similar for other affiliations in the future. With last year's expansion, the Neutral Zone, the no-hands strategy got a new drive and operates much more consistent now. But as you just witnessed, it operates on a lot of cards and parts, and you need to play very precisely to make it work. Once you get a routine, I am pretty sure it is very rewarding to play the Imperial Starfleet, since it is such a unique playstyle among all the affiliations. Unfortunately, I couldn't show off with Kevin's deck in a more presentable way. On top of that, I made some bad decisions throughout the game. Somehow I play far more sloppy on Lecky than in the physical version. My second redshirting attempt at Regulus, for example, was not necessary. I was concerned about Cyterians, but with the short space line, it wouldn't have been a big deal, and I should have gone there with the full crew. Cyterians would have posed much less of a problem than linguistic legerdemain. I also could have started to attempt insurrection earlier, since I had enough anthropology to keep Duckblind running in case of a mass killing. Especially for the last mission attempt there, I also should have moved Corby with the crew and used Excalbion Kaelus's game text to get more medical. And even though I read the game correctly, I vastly disregarded that information when going for the final mission. This was quite careless, even though my chances for winning were quite slim at that point of the game. It sounds like a cheap excuse, but I was far more engaged with what Niall was doing instead of taking more thought into what I am doing. I haven't played Mirror Starfleet before, and there was a lot to follow and keep track of. That said, if I were aware of the exact text on all the contender objectives, I also should have seeded the dead end at Earth or Vulcan to postpone the declaration of the new sovereign a bit more. As for Kevin's deck itself, I enjoyed playing it. Of course, it is especially fulfilling wiping out your opponent's whole squad, so the dilemma strategy worked out nicely. But the draw deck needs some refinement. The ratio between personnel that can be played for free felt a bit off. I played only 2 androids throughout the game, which makes expanding a seat slot for cybernetics expertise somewhat questionable. So I would add 1 or 2 androids. Overall, the proportion of cards that consume your normal card play is too high. I would reduce that number and probably cut one of the Quantum Slipstream drives among most of the personnel that cannot be played otherwise. Depending on the deck size you end up, the amount of recruit mercenaries and war councils should be adapted. In an average game, you probably play 2 to 3 copies of each, while you usually want to play recruit mercenaries on turn 2 and 3 and war council later on to refill your hand. To compensate bad draws, adding 1 or 2 mutation might be an option to filter excess copies. Another option could be using a cycling card like Recreation Room, which is especially nice since you can put the cards you want to download with Recruit Mercenaries back into your deck, and usually you don't want to draw the cards you want to download. But to make that work, you need to revamp the deck more fundamentally and add a significant amount of toss personnel.